Imagine walking into Walmart, picking up your favorite American product, and flipping it over. Made in India. Your iPhone. Your Harley-Davidson. Even the jeans you're wearing right now, all of them quietly shifting production thousands of miles away while you weren't looking. But here's what's really crazy. This isn't just about a few products. This is about entire industries, defense contracts, and even military equipment. So how did America's most iconic brands end up being made in India? And why didn't anyone tell you? Today, we are uncovering the biggest manufacturing shift of the 21st century, a silent power play that's reshaping global economics and nobody saw it coming. Let's dive in. It started about a decade ago, but nobody was paying attention. While politicians argued about China and tariffs dominated the news, American corporations were already making their move. See, the US-China trade war didn't just create tension, it created opportunity. American companies needed an escape route. They needed a manufacturing partner that was reliable, English-speaking, democratic, and most importantly, not China. Enter India. But here's the thing. India didn't just happen to be in the right place at the right time. The Indian government saw this coming years before it happened. They launched initiatives like Make in India back in 2014. They reformed labor laws, built industrial corridors, invested billions in infrastructure, and offered tax incentives that would make any CFO's eyes light up. But this wasn't charity. This was strategy. India knew that whoever controlled the supply chain would control the future. They weren't just offering cheap labor, they were offering a complete ecosystem. Engineers, designers, manufacturers, and logistics, all in one place. And American companies took the bait. Or maybe they had no choice. Because when Apple, the world's most valuable company, decides to bet big on your country, everyone else follows. Let's talk about Apple first, because they're the ones who started this avalanche. In 2017, Apple started assembling iPhones in Bengaluru. At first, it was just older models, the iPhone SE, nothing fancy. Most people dismissed it as a publicity stunt to get into the Indian market. But Tim Cook had bigger plans. Fast forward to today, and Apple has invested over $7 billion in Indian manufacturing. $7 billion. They're not just assembling phones anymore. They're producing the iPhone 15, iPhone 15 Pro, the latest models, right there in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Foxconn, Pegatron, Wistron, Apple's biggest suppliers, have all set up massive facilities across India. We're talking about factories that employ hundreds of thousands of workers, operating 24/7, churning out millions of devices every month. And here's the kicker. India now manufactures about 14% of the world's iPhones. That number is expected to hit 25% by 2025. Think about that. 1 in 4 iPhones could soon come from India. When Tim Cook visited India recently, he didn't just meet with government officials. He opened 2 flagship Apple stores in Mumbai and Delhi and called India a major focus for Apple's future. Translation: India isn't just a factory. It's becoming Apple's next home base. And once Apple made that move, the floodgates opened. So Apple led the charge. But they weren't alone for long. Let's talk about Harley-Davidson, the most American brand you can think of. Born in Milwaukee, symbol of freedom, rebellion, and the open road. In 2018, during the US-India tariff war, Harley announced something shocking. They were shutting down their Kansas City plant and moving production overseas. And where did they go? India. They partnered with Hero MotoCorp to assemble bikes in Haryana. Bikes that were then exported back to markets around the world, including the United States. Imagine that. An American biker cruising down Route 66 on a Harley-Davidson that was built in India. Then there's Levi's. Levi Strauss & Company, the company that invented blue jeans and dressed generations of American workers, cowboys, and rebels. Guess where a huge chunk of their denim is now woven and stitched? Gujarat, India. The same jeans that built the American West are now being cut and sewn in Indian factories and shipped worldwide. And it's not just consumer products. Boeing, yes, Boeing, the aerospace giant, sources critical components from India. Tata Advanced Systems manufactures parts for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and Apache helicopters. Actual parts of American passenger jets and military aircraft are being made in India. Then you've got Caterpillar. Those massive yellow bulldozers and excavators you see on construction sites? A lot of them are now forged with Indian steel and assembled in Indian plants before being shipped to American job sites. The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't outsourcing for cheap labor. This was a strategic realignment. But those were just the warm-ups. Because what happened next took this from an economic story to a geopolitical one. The next wave wasn't just about consumer goods or construction equipment. It was about defense, technology, national security. The Pentagon started paying attention. Let's talk about GE Aviation. General Electric, one of the pillars of American industry, now manufactures critical jet engine components in India, not just for commercial airlines, but for US military aircraft. We're talking about precision-engineered parts that go into fighter jets, transport planes, and helicopters. Parts that have to meet the strictest military standards on Earth. And they're being made in Indian facilities under GE's supervision. Then there's Ford. After famously exiting the Indian market in 2021, Ford did something nobody expected. They came back. Not to sell cars in India, but to build them. Ford's Chennai plant now manufactures vehicles for export to South Africa, the Middle East, and yes, back to the United States. American cars, built in India, sold in America. The circle was complete. John Deere, the agricultural giant, followed suit. Those iconic green tractors that have plowed American fields for over a century? A growing number of them are now made in Pune. Farmers in Kansas, Iowa, and Nebraska are driving tractors built in Indian factories. And most of them have no idea. Then there's pharmaceuticals. Pfizer, one of the world's largest drug makers, produces a significant portion of its medications in India, specifically in Hyderabad. Life-saving drugs, antibiotics, vaccines, manufactured in Indian plants and distributed worldwide, including to American pharmacies. India has become the pharmacy of the world, supplying about 50% of the world's generic drugs. Pfizer is just one of dozens of Western pharmaceutical companies that depend on Indian production. And finally, Intel. Not manufacturing chips yet, but something arguably more important, designing them. Intel's R&D hub in Bengaluru is one of the largest outside the United States. Indian engineers are designing the architecture for the next generation of processors that will power American computers, servers, and data centers. When you think Intel inside, there's a good chance an Indian engineer designed it. This wasn't just manufacturing anymore. This was intellectual capital, innovation, the future. So what happens when you move this much production to one country? Economics 101. Money follows manufacturing. Every factory that opens creates jobs, not just on the assembly line, but in logistics, quality control, management, engineering, and services. Every shipment that leaves Chennai port is dollars flowing into the Indian economy. Every contract signed is leverage gained. India's GDP has been growing at over 6% annually. It recently became the world's fifth largest economy, overtaking the United Kingdom. And it's projected to become the third largest by 2030, behind only the US and China. But here's what most people miss. This isn't just about India getting richer. For every factory that opens in Tamil Nadu, there's a factory that closes, or never opens, in Michigan, Ohio, or Pennsylvania. For every job created in Delhi, there's a job that disappears in Detroit. This is the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to talk about. Globalization is a zero-sum game when it comes to manufacturing jobs. American workers in the Rust Belt have watched their industries hollow out for decades, first to Japan, then to China, and now to India. And here's the twist. Unlike with China, Americans can't even get angry about it. Because India is our ally, our partner in the Indo-Pacific strategy, our counterweight to Chinese dominance. So politically, economically, and strategically, we need India to succeed. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. And this creates a fascinating dynamic between Washington and New Delhi. Publicly, they're best friends, strategic partners, democratic allies standing together against authoritarianism. But privately, it's more complicated. Because every dollar India earns from manufacturing is a dollar of leverage. Every factory that relocates gives India more negotiating power. Think about it. If Apple needs India to make iPhones, and Boeing needs India to make aircraft parts, and Pfizer needs India to make medications, then India can start making demands. Want access to our manufacturing base? Open your markets to our IT services. Grant more H-1B visas to our engineers. Support us on this UN vote. Back us on that trade policy. Manufacturing dependency creates political leverage. Always has, always will. And India knows this. They've watched China use the same playbook for 30 years. Here's the difference. China weaponized its manufacturing dominance. They used it to expand territorial claims, suppress dissent, and challenge American hegemony. India, they're playing it smarter. They're positioning themselves as the responsible manufacturing hub. Democratic, rule-abiding, aligned with Western values. But make no mistake, they're accumulating power. Quietly, strategically. And the US is caught in a paradox. They need India to counter China, but they're creating a new dependency in the process. It's like solving one problem by creating another. Now here's where it gets really wild. Remember how I said even defense and military equipment are involved? Let me give you an example that'll blow your mind. US military uniforms. That's right. The uniforms worn by American soldiers, the men and women who represent US military power around the world. A significant portion of them are stitched in Indian textile zones. Boots, bags, tactical gear, sourced from Indian manufacturers. Think about the symbolism of that for a second. An American soldier, serving overseas, defending American interests, gearing up in equipment labeled Made in India. And it's not just symbolic, it's strategic. The US military has strict Berry Amendment requirements that usually mandate American-made textiles and equipment. But there are exceptions, and India increasingly qualifies under trade agreements and allied nation carve-outs. So yeah, outsourcing has gone from factories to national identity, from consumer goods to the actual symbols of American power. How did we get here? Simple: cost and capacity. American textile manufacturing has been in decline for 40 years. There just aren't enough domestic producers left to meet military demand at scale. So the Pentagon had to look elsewhere. And India, with its massive textile industry, stepped in to fill the gap. It's efficient. It's practical. But it's also weird. Right. Because at what point does outsourcing cross the line from economic efficiency to strategic vulnerability? Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This shift isn't just about India and America. It's about the entire architecture of global power. For the last 75 years, since World War II, the United States has been the dominant economic and military superpower. We had the strongest military, the biggest economy, and we controlled global supply chains. But that's changing. China challenged American dominance by becoming the world's factory. They manufactured everything: cheap goods, high-tech equipment, everything in between, and that gave them enormous geopolitical leverage. The US response? Diversify, decouple, find alternatives. And that's where India comes in. India isn't replacing China entirely, not yet, maybe not ever, but they're becoming the hedge. The plan B, the alternative supply chain. This strategy is called friendshoring, moving production to allied nations instead of rivals. It sounds great in theory, but here's the catch. India isn't just a passive player. They have their own ambitions. India wants to be a superpower. They want a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. They want to rival China as the dominant power in Asia. They want to be taken seriously on the world stage. And manufacturing is their path to get there. Because here's what history teaches us. Nations that control production control destiny. Britain ruled the world during the Industrial Revolution because they controlled manufacturing. America became a superpower because we outproduced everyone during and after World War II. China became a global power because they became the world's factory. Now it's India's turn. And unlike China, India has one massive advantage: democracy. Western nations are far more comfortable depending on a democratic ally than an authoritarian rival. That gives India a unique position. They can integrate into Western supply chains without triggering the same security fears that China does. So India isn't just rising, they're being actively empowered by the very system they're challenging. It's a paradox, and it's happening in real time. So what's next? If you think this is as far as it goes, think again. India's ambitions are just getting started. Next on the list, Tesla. Elon Musk has been in talks with the Indian government for years about setting up manufacturing there. If that happens, Tesla suppliers will follow: batteries, electronics, motors, all potentially made in India. Then there's semiconductors. India is pushing hard to build its own chip manufacturing industry. The US and EU are supporting this through the CHIPS Alliance because they want to diversify away from Taiwan. If India cracks semiconductor production at scale, that's game over. That's true technological sovereignty. Defense electronics are another frontier. India already manufactures drones, radar systems, and communication equipment for its own military. Now, they're positioning to export these to allied nations, including the US. And AI. India has the second largest population of software engineers in the world. Bengaluru is already a global hub for AI research and development. As AI becomes the defining technology of the 21st century, India is positioning itself to be a central player. By 2030, the phone in your hand, the car in your driveway, the medicine in your cabinet, even the computer you're watching this video on, could all trace their origins back to India. This isn't speculation. This is the trajectory we are on. So here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud. Is this the rise of a new manufacturing empire, or the quiet decline of America's? Is this smart strategy, or are we trading one dependency for another? And what happens when India decides they don't need us as much as we need them? I don't have all the answers, but I know this: the world is changing faster than most people realize. So tell me, what do you think? Is this shift good for America? Good for the world? Or are we sleepwalking into a future we are not ready for? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this video opened your eyes, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is far from over.